Welcome to Season 4 of the Get Out of Teaching podcast presented by Larksong Enterprises. This podcast is for teachers who are considering leaving education but feel like they have no options. I'm your host, Elizabeth Diakos. I'm a career transition coach who guides overwhelmed teachers through a 5-step process out of education and into a life they love. I'd like to see a world where the work of teachers is valued and respected, and that teachers have a career pathway that enables them to continue to offer value to society beyond their work in the classroom. So in this season, we'll be speaking to other experts who help people to change careers, as well as a few ex-teachers who've forged a pathway into something new. So come along for the ride as we get out of teaching. Episode 15. Hi everyone and welcome to the show. On today's show, I'm very pleased to be speaking with Alice Bacon, who hails from South Australia, and Alice is an inner coach expert. She empowers people to hear their own voice. Alice, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and I feel very privileged for the opportunity to be able to connect to you on here. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Alice, before we started recording, we were just having a bit of a chat about some of the amazing range of work that you do. And I was particularly interested in the work you do with defence personnel who are coming out of maybe leaving their job either voluntarily or because a position's ended, or I'm not exactly sure what all the reasons might be why someone would leave a Defence Force position. Can you tell us a little bit about that work? Because I can see a lot of similarities between that and a teacher wanting to leave education.
Yeah, so one of the several streams of work that I do is very fortunate to work for a global organisation who has got a contract to work with defence personnel. And the work that I do is what we class as meaningful engagement, and it's supporting defence members who are either transitioning out of defence for medical reasons or because they are opting voluntarily to exit defence. And defence feel very strongly in supporting their staff as part of that transition, whether it's to identify what they want to do once they've left defence, or to be able to support them come up with a plan of action that is going to give them the most stability as far as their transition and what they do. So it's really fortunate that there are quite a number of different models, but mostly importantly, it's about really being able to support the individual. They've come out of an environment that they've been in for quite some time, which is most probably very similar to teachers as well. And they're really venturing out to do something that they've never done before. And it takes a lot of courage because you're leading a family unit, which is what I imagine would be the same for the school teachers as well in the education department.
Yeah, a lot of the teachers I speak to are older single women who maybe are supporting young teenagers or, young adult children. And it is really hard because they're often the sole breadwinner. If they've possibly had some time out of work having children. And then what I often see is that they'll come back to teaching. Maybe it's not sparking joy for them in the way that it once was. And so they want to get out, but they're sort of really bound by the golden handcuffs to stay longer than they'd rather because of the financial constraints. And often, their whole life's kind of bound up in having worked in an industry for maybe 20 or even 30 years, and they just can't see a way forward. Now, I know not everyone's in that situation, but that does seem to be, they're the people who are coming to me and saying, Elizabeth, can you help me see the possibilities for the future? So I've been talking to quite a few people for this series of the podcast, and I've got this character called Donna, who's she's 52. She's worked in education for a couple of decades at least, and she's now in a position where she wants to move on. What advice would you give someone in that situation?
I think the key to remember, and a really good tool for people to use, Elizabeth, is if people can become comfortable with what it is that they don't know, because it's the unknown that creates the most fear for us. And the moment that we go to hesitate with anything in life, the moment we hesitate, and Mel Robbins has a really good TED talk and a 5-second rule. The moment we go to hesitate, foot goes on the brake in the brain, and we release cortisol and we start thinking of worst case scenario, worst case possibility. And that's why we then tend to get stuck in moving forward. So a really good exercise for people to do is to actually list all the milestones, all the changes that's happened in their life. And then once they've done that, have a column on the right-hand side, 2 columns, one titled planned and one titled unplanned. And what they'll actually find that everything that's happened in life has actually been unplanned. Yes, we might have an idea of wanting to become a teacher. We might have an idea of wanting to get married, but we don't actually know what that looks like and when it's going to happen. So it really is about empowering people to become comfortable with what they don't know versus what they do know.
Okay, so you're saying that most of our lives we haven't actually had a plan in place, and we just it just evolves. I'll take that. I definitely would agree with that in my situation. I think we did actually plan to get married, but we had no idea what we were talking about at the time and what that would look like. But as far as a career goes, I just went off to uni and studied arts, and then kind of went, oh, well, now what do I do? So it was definitely for me, it wasn't a planned career. I know I do talk to a lot of teachers, though, who always wanted to be a teacher, and they thought it was a calling for them. And so I guess in that situation, that would be a plan. So we've got through life with all these unplanned moments, and yet here we are. We're all still standing. So I guess what I'm drawing from that is that you're saying it'll be okay if it's not all completely planned, because you survived this far.
That's right. And even though they knew they wanted to become a teacher, they didn't know when that was going to happen. They didn't know where they were going to teach. They didn't know which school. So, yes, they had an idea, but the way that it evolved and what eventuated could never have been planned. They were a series of circumstances once they were committed to becoming a teacher. Mm. So, I always say to people that would you go to the library and borrow the same book every day for the rest of your life if there was 1 million books in there?
Right.
And of course, no one would do that, would they? Because there's 1 million books out there, 1 million opportunities. Mm. So what we don't realise that we do really well is every time we go to think or contemplate or revisit those fears and those doubts, we're going to the one book of our life. Every conversation, every movie, every discussion, everything we've eaten and experienced is in that one book. And yet we keep referencing that one book, but you're never going to get a different answer if you keep thinking about it or overanalyzing it. You need to step out of that book to start really seeing what opportunities. And the other thing is the human being is very comfortable with change. We breathe, we move every moment. Our body is in a constant stream of change. So it's not that change is what fear, it's what potentially could happen once we make a change. What's that impact going to mean? What am I going to lose? What's that going to look like? So, of course, the moment that we go into the unknown, we start comparing, what have I got now? What could I have? How is that going to look? And what they've identified is the moment we go to compare anything, we release cortisol. And the problem with releasing cortisol is it kicks in the primal brain, the caveman brain of 2,300 years ago. And the brain goes, oh, cortisol's been released. Person's in danger. I need to have them on high alert. So the person starts naturally scanning negative over positive. So every single time they go to compare, cortisol's released. They're never going to feel comfortable or confident in what they're doing. So there is a way that you can combat that. And even by having a to-do list, a bullet list, just to even write things immediately as they come to mind on a piece of paper is actually going to stop the person releasing that cortisol that then is going to put them in a backward position.
Right. So you're sort of suggesting that if you, it's almost like storing it away. It's safe now. It's on paper.
Right.
Still reconsider that option or that possibility coming up later. But in the moment, I'm not getting bogged down with the fear that surrounds it.
That's right. That's right. And the other thing that people need to realise is for the brain, it needs to become familiar, to be comfortable, to become confident. So we actually need to become familiar with the new arrangement that we want to introduce. Because anything that we're not familiar with, of course, because we're very tribal, the brain wants to assess, is that new environment going to harm us or is it going to keep us safe? And if the brain can't assess what that environment is going to bring forward, then it's just going to evoke even more fear within us. So there's lots of things going on in the mind from a process perspective that happens to everyone, just at different degrees, but it's actually getting smarter and one step ahead of the mind. And also, even if we just reflect, whenever we go have a new job, whenever we don't want to go to that party and we say, Alice, just get dressed, go to that party, surprise, surprise, we enjoy ourselves. Getting people to recognise that resistance, any form of resistance, is actually an inner voice communication letting us know safe passage is ahead. If you make a decision to do something and you get resistance, that should actually give you the confidence to do it even quicker, because we're no longer feeling safe and we no longer can hear our inner voice. So our inner voice says, well, how can I get their attention? I'll give them some resistance. It's a red flag warning just to let us know that we've just gone down the wrong rabbit hole and we need to step out of it and everything's going to be all right.
Okay, so let's use that party analogy because that's pretty safe,
Yeah.
So I've been invited to a party in a few weeks' time, and actually, we've been in lockdown for so long. It's like, what? I'm allowed out, and also, will it even be on? Will the situation change between now and then, and it will be rescheduled or something? But there's also part of me that goes, oh, I've got to think of something to wear. I have to work out how I'm going to get there. It's not an easy, it's not easy to get to. Do I drive or do I go by public transport? If I go by public transport, I'm going to have to wear a mask, still. When I get there, will I know anyone else at the event? There's 100 things. And I'm like such an extrovert. I love going I love going out. So for me to be thinking like that, it's like, whoa, what is going on? Why are you so resistant to this idea? And I think, it is a combination of all those things about we've been in lockdown for back and forth for so many times. It's like, oh, what's the point of planning anything? But I think there is something there about that fear. And so what you're saying is just say yes to the event and then work out the path. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So pretty much. So we're used to parenting ourselves, but we don't realise and we don't do it proactively enough. So the moment that we have any fear or concern, we're in the left side of the brain. The left side of the brain is what interacts with the past. So we need the right side of the brain, which is in the present moment, our inner voice, our authentic self, to parent it. And we do this all the time. I don't know what to wear tomorrow. Oh, I'll just figure it out. And all of a sudden, when you wake up in the morning, you just know what to wear. Or, I really don't want to go out tonight. And it's like, parent yourself, just get up, get dressed, just go. And then every single time, surprise, surprise, we always enjoy ourselves. So it's about how do we proactively parent ourselves? Because when we're in fear, when we're in the past, that is the egoic mind. It's there to look after our safety. But the problem is caveman days, anytime cortisol is released, we think we're in danger. So we need to parent that left side and just reassure it that everything's going to be okay. And we can all create what I call your 6-second autopilot. We can get into the practice of using an affirmation, using a strategy that the moment we stress or we become worried, this 6-second autopilot slips into our awareness. And the moment that we acknowledge it and repeat it to ourselves silently is the moment we step out of that fear back into that present moment where we can be guided by our inner voice that has our best interest all the time. The fact that teachers are thinking about leaving, that is their inner voice, letting them know there is a purpose. There's something else out there waiting for you. There is an opportunity for you to make a difference to yourself as well as other people. We have not even really began to process what that inner voice is actually communicating to us. We hear it in our silence. We hear it when we're in peace, when we're walking, we're in the shower. But the moment we're in chaos, we can no longer hear that inner voice. So, of course, it tries to get our attention through our emotions. But we're not educated to understand what our emotions are actually trying to tell us.
So Let's go back to the 6-second autopilot. That's
Yeah.
interesting. How does that work?
So when you are in your calm state, when you're not in a stressful situation, you identify strategies that work for you. There's no right or wrong. It's just about finding something that works for you. And there's lots of tools that can be accessed. And it's about using that strategy to arm yourself that the moment you become stressed, you have it on a sticky note, you write it somewhere, you reference it. If you find that you've become stressed and caught up in the chaos, we all get a chance, whether it's an hour later, 2 hours, or 24 hours later, we always get a chance in our awareness to go back and reflect on that situation. Most of us, when we reflect, we give ourselves a hard time for overreacting. But that opportunity to reflect is our inner voice coming into our awareness saying, Alice, this is a perfect opportunity for you to reenact what you would have liked to have done. And that reenactment from visualization, psychologists have proven that when we have a movie actor, when we have a musician or a sportsman, when they physically visualize their practice, they get up to 100% accuracy. When they physically do it, it's only up to 55%. So if we can recognize in our reflection to reenact visually how we would have liked to have responded, we're then creating that autopilot for next time. We're creating a new habit, and eventually that habit of practice becomes permanent.
So let me get this clear. What you're talking about is actually visualizing or playing a movie in your head, if you like, that is the ideal situation played out. And that becomes your almost like a default memory of what it should be. Is that where we're going with this? Okay.
100%.
Is there a term for that? That's a strange concept. Is there is there a term for it?
I've called it creating your 6-second pilot, autopilot. So that's something that, I've looking at all the different tools and strategies that are out there, the Mel Robbins, the 5-second rule, it's been proven that the brain can never be upset for the first reason it thinks. So the first moment that we become emotionally reactive, it starts about the dishes. Then it's about the garbage. Then you didn't talk to me at that party 2 weeks ago. Hey, let's bring it back about the dishes. So scientists have proven that it's not actually possible for the brain to ever be upset for the first reason it thinks. So even just reminding ourselves of that. But what we need to realize is we've got 6 seconds between the mind and the brain before the brain goes into finding shortcuts of the past. And we want it to do that when it's working to our advantage. So as an example, Elizabeth, if you spend 7 weeks learning the piano every single day, on that 8th week, you want to be able to pick up what you last learned. You don't want to have to start from the beginning. So you want the brain to go from A to B as quickly as possible. That works in our advantage when we're learning something that's good for us. However, the moment we go into a reactive state and we enter the brain, it goes to look for that shortcut. Where has this happened before? How can I get this person there quicker? Because the brain can't differentiate what's good for us and what's not good for us. The brain is designed to get better at whatever it does.
Right. So if you're feeling upset or angry, it wants to get you there into that emotion even faster because that's where it thinks you need to go. And
that's right.
So what you're saying is you need to kind of I hate to use the term circuit breaker because it's come to be related to the pandemic, but that idea of just like cutting that circuit so that it doesn't kind of play itself out.
That's right. That's right. Because when it's playing out, we're in the past, we're in the left side of the brain. You need to get to the right side of the brain. They don't coexist. So you need that circuit breaker to get you over. And, there's all different strategies. So if I start having any resistance or if I start stressing, just in my awareness, my inner voice will say, we're never upset for the first reason we think. Alice, what's the opportunity here? This too will pass. Are my intentions misguided? Something will come into my awareness that just creates that circuit breaker. And because I've now created a permanent habit, it comes in immediately. And if I can get it immediately, I can then switch over and be back into my calm, logical, practical state. If I don't step out of it within 90 seconds, I've got to hope something external comes along, such as a phone call, a knock on the door, somebody interrupts that thought process, that record that's playing over and over in my mind. Because the mind is designed to get better at what it does. So if we're constantly in fear of change and leaving our job, all you're doing is training your brain to get even better at having and experiencing that fear.
Okay, so say we're lying in bed, and I know this is what used to happen to me. I would be lying in bed, and I didn't want to sit up and put my feet on the ground, because if I knew that if I did that, I set in motion my day, which was to go to school, or to go to work. And so I would be lying in bed going, I don't want to get out of bed now, because if I know that inevitably I'll end up back in the situation that I don't want to be in. So where does this mind body kind of relationship, where does that fit into that scenario?
So it's actually about understanding how the mind works, so you can become very objective and detached to it, because when we're emotional, we're too attached. And, I don't know if you've heard or seen of Mel Robbins, but she basically says that if you procrastinate for more than 5 seconds, foot goes on in the brake, it thinks you're in danger, it needs to hold back that energy in case you've got to run for your life.
Yeah.
So it's about rationalizing what is going on with your mind that goes on in everybody's mind. It's just not you.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're in bed, you want to stay safe. You don't want to get up. You've started to compare. So you've released cortisol. So it automatically thinks worst case scenario. You can't be of a positive mindset when you've got cortisol released in your body, because that sends an alarm that you're in danger. And your egoic mind wants to keep you safe. So it does anything to keep you safe, even if it means keeping you in bed longer.
Right. Okay.
Because it sees you getting up as danger now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Whereas if you spring out of bed, it's done.
It's done. You've already dismissed it. You're now in control. You're now being empowered through life, not through your past experiences. And that's the key. How do we become empowered with life? How do we recognize, and how does each one of these teachers recognize that life wants to value them, but they need to value themselves first? If they only value who they are at 20% and they disregard themselves at 80%, life is going to do exactly the same. But more importantly, the fact they have a desire to be changing careers and exiting, who are they to question and judge their purpose that's actually trying to communicate through them?
Right. So you're saying that if you've got this feeling or this desire to leave and do something different, and you talk about purpose, I think every single conversation I've ever had with a teacher, they all want to do something that is meaningful and has purpose and is good for the world in some way, either to impart their knowledge when they were teaching, or to share their love of learning, or help reveal some knowledge or understanding to someone else. Even if it's just like help. A lot of teachers say, I want to go and work in a factory where I don't have to think anymore. But even that is like, I still want to do that to the best of my capacity. So even if I end up in a job that's kind of looks like it's got nothing else going on for it, they still want to show up as their best self in that role. So, but they get stuck because of the fear. That's what I'm saying over and over.
Yeah, that's right.
And so part of it, what you're saying is, if I'm getting this right, is that you've got to circuit break and jump out of bed or whatever and start working on the plan that is going to get you out of that situation that you fear.
That's right. And, they want to keep their students accountable. How about keeping themselves accountable? And I don't mean to be rude, but they actually asked for this. They actually asked life and said that they want to change, that they want to do something different. So life is trying to encourage them to take that next step. And we've got two options. We either, when babies are born, they're built with two emotions. They're built with fear, or they're built with love. From love comes courage and confidence, and being confident in who you are and what you're doing. From fear comes doubt Procrastination holds us back. I can't do it. I'll never be good enough. I'll never be successful. And it's about recognizing which state you're in and what you actually want to choose. And it really is about empowering and parenting self. The fact that they've had this desire, the fact that they've said they want to do something, they're only being encouraged, but by buying into the fear, they become blinded by it as well.
Yeah. And yeah, I see that so often where I had someone join the Get Out of Teaching Facebook group the other day, and I tagged everyone in the post to say, welcome to the new members. And there were over 100 new members. And I got a private message saying, why did you single me out? This is not the first time this has happened. So, and I'm like, well, there were 100 other people that I singled out as well. Like, it wasn't just you. And also probably nobody else is looking for the message to you. They're looking for the message to them. And you joined a group called Get Out of Teaching. What did you think was going to happen? You know, like, it's kind of like you're already here. You're committed to being in a group that's called Get Out of Teaching because you want to get out of teaching. And the first step of getting out of teaching is to acknowledge it to the world that you're going to get out of teaching. So it doesn't really matter if I say your name now, you know, like, it's just interesting. There's so much fear around it.
And the other thing that they can do as a very simple exercise is actually recognize each time they don't actually want to be teaching or at work, start to actually take note and a record of how actually things working for them that day. Because I can guarantee if they're happy being there, things are going to go fine. They're going to be in flow. Everything's going to have a way of working itself out. But the moment we don't want to be somewhere, the moment we want a change, well, then life goes, if you're not going to make that decision, things are going to happen today that you're not going to enjoy your day.
Right. Yeah.
So life is trying to encourage them in every single way.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Early on in this podcast, I did an interview with Karen Chasten, who's a grief coach, and I was telling her about this. I did some relief teaching after I'd kind of already left. I just did a few days here and there of relief teaching. And in the morning this day at a school that I had only been to a couple of times, I had this most divine class that was so beautiful. They all knew what they were doing. They all had their work to do. They were quiet. It was like this beautiful, blissful morning. And then in the afternoon, I was in a different year level and it was like a scene out of Dante's Inferno. It's like this crazy, just out of control class with no order and complete chaos. And the teacher left me these garbled instructions and I couldn't understand what she was asking me to do. And there was one kid that was just running around the room like a lunatic, sweeping off everything off all the bookshelves and all the tables, and it was just, and I looked at, there's another class next door who were also beautifully behaved, and the other relief teacher was in there, and I just like shrugged at him and he just looked at me and shook his head. It's like neither of us knew what was going on. But it was really interesting because Karen said to me, what a gift that was, because that day it just reminded you that it was time to get out.
Yeah.
You said if you had a beautiful morning and a beautiful afternoon, you would have just thought, oh, maybe it's not so bad after all. Maybe I should stay. But it just was
right.
Like, no, it was absolute chaos. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. We don't realise those messages that we get. We don't realise them at all, Elizabeth. And life is trying to communicate, but it communicates through that silent voice, through that inner awareness. When we hear our fears and our doubts, they're coming from the mind of the past. They're a replay of what we've said to ourselves previously. So how do we actually distinguish? The other thing to keep in mind is scientists have proven through the heart maths that what's in our heart radiates over a kilometre. You go visit family and they're happy, you want to be there. You go visit family and they're not happy, you don't. Same as if you walk in a shop. So we don't realise our state of being, the energy that we're holding. If we're not wanting to be somewhere, we're on a lower energy, we're on a lower vibration. We're actually only can attract that lower vibration field. We can't attract something that's a high vibration if we're not in alignment with it. And that's why when we're feeling really good and happy and those serotonin, those dopamines are just, and we've got an amazing chemical factory in our brain, that's why things just go our way all the time, because it's what we're attracting from our own inner world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Like, yeah, when I go out walking in the mornings and if I do a Facebook Live and I've got that lovely energy and vibrancy, you know, I get such great responses to that because people can see that there's, you know, there's life there, and it is life-giving, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so back to Donna, our mythical Donna. She's actually realized that she does want to get out. She's started thinking about it. What would you advise her in terms of just working out what to do next? Like, and in a very general way, where should she go first?
So the first thing is to journal. First thing is to get things down on paper, create a to-do list, compartmentalize, physically write it down what it's going to look like.
Okay.
Write down what are the options, who can you talk to, who do you know need to go see a recruitment person, do you need to get a career coach? What are the options of what you need to consider? It's about getting the brain very, very familiar with the process that you're going to apply. Once it becomes familiar, it becomes comfortable.
Right.
And there's heaps of tools that people can use as well if they're not sure of what they're doing. There's heaps of assessment tools. Like I use one called a Berkman, and that shows an assessment that's got 66 years worth of research and study. Over 50 million reports have been done, but that shows people how their brain works from a primary and a secondary. What do they need from people and environment to stay motivated and be most productive? And what happens if they don't get those, how they might react. And I know there are other assessments available, but it's about how do you get the most tools that's going to set you up for success, to give you the assurance to move forward without that fear and without that doubt.
So that Berkman tool is really about like how you function in the workplace, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing. Whether you're starting a new project, going into a new work environment, a new team, it shows you how your brain assesses from the primary, what it needs to gather its information to start being able to utilize its strengths in actual work performance. And this just gives people an insight to who they are and what they're actually capable of. It also then identifies through interest and motivators what type of organisation and job families. So there are lots of good tools out there to show the possibility of what can be done.
Yeah. Okay. So she's decided she wants to get a job working for someone else. Like I often talk to people and they're like, I could set up my own business or I could work for someone else. And right now I want to work for someone else because, you know, there's a pandemic, there's a lot of fear around. I don't want to have to rely on me making all the money. So I'm going to work for somebody else. I say she's done this assessment and she's worked out the kinds of places or organizations that might be good to work with. Then what?
It's really about networking. It's about identifying that hidden market. Write down a list of all your networks and contacts of people that you can talk to. You know, because what happens when you start having the conversations, have no attachment to the outcome, have no expectation. It's just like planting 100 seeds and just knowing that, okay, one's going to grow somewhere. I don't know where it is, but that's completely fine. It's about starting to have those conversations to plant the seeds. The person that you talk to at the time might not know of any possible jobs. However, as they go over their next 2 or 3 days, over the next week, they're going to be on alert. And if anything comes across that somebody's looking for work or relief, they will then be able to connect that person and join the dots. So it really is about starting to have the conversation with people, talking to recruiters, seeing what your options are.
Yeah.
It really is about taking action that allows progress to happen.
So when you're working with the defence people and they're coming out of a job that's not just a calling often, I think, but also often would provide their accommodation, that must be really scary for them because they're going to lose their house as well when they leave. So how do you get them from that fearfulness and that concern about every aspect of their life to the point where they've actually got a plan in place? Is it just about connections? I feel like there has to be more to that.
Yeah, it's really about focus and it's really about a plan. Getting them to recognise Are they being in a present state, in the present moment, or are they being reactive from the past? Because with change, there's a huge cycle. We have an acceptance, but then the fear comes in. Then we feel, okay, this is a good thing. But then we worry, how are we going to pay our bills? So there's so much going on, but it really is about parenting self. It really is about staying in the present moment. It is about having an action plan, whether you're somebody that needs a lot of detail, whether you're somebody that needs to talk to people, whether you're somebody that's got to create the vision. It's about identifying what works for you. But more importantly than anything, Elizabeth, we need to connect with another person that we trust, whether it's a career coach, whether it's a life coach, whether it's a friend or a mentor. We need somebody to help us through the process so we can give that tough love, so we can support, so we can rationalize those fears and bring common sense and logic and practicality to it. It really is about not dealing with it on your own and validating those fears because they feel real. But the moment we have an action, the moment we're committed, all of a sudden things just start happening for us, and it's just about trusting that process.
I love that things start happening. I think you're right. It's like that game. My kids used to play this game called Punch Buggy where they would punch each other on the arm. It's a little bit of a violent game. If they saw a yellow Volkswagen go by, like a beetle, little beetle. And it's amazing how once you kind of activate, you're looking for those, you start seeing them everywhere. I have a little blue Honda Jazz. It's like a sparkly blue. I love it. And there must be about 5 in my neighborhood that I'm like, where have these cars come from? I see them everywhere now. It's amazing. So we are sort of, I guess, once we're primed for those opportunities, we start to see them everywhere. And that opens up lots of options then.
Yeah. It's about knowing that life actually wants to work for you. And the only thing that limits us is our own mind. We need to get our mind out of the way. We need to utilize what we know that's going to work to our advantage. But anything from the mind that's going to put us in a state of fear or hold us back, we need just to recognize that, hey, I'm not 2,300 years ago living in a cave. I know you're looking after me, but it's about parenting it and assuring it that you're going to be okay. And that's why I always say resistance is just letting me know safe passage ahead. The moment I say that is the moment I'm back in clarity, the moment I can start seeing opportunities. We cannot see opportunities present if we're living in that fear or that stress. Cortisol is released.
Yeah. I read some research that said you literally get tunnel vision when you're in that fearful state, and you lose, I think it's 17% of your peripheral vision because you're so focused on like, how do I get out of here? I just need to run.
Yeah.
And so
that's
that
right.
flight response kicks in.
Yeah. And if you're living in fear and you're agitated and you're nervous, you're releasing that energy. Do you think anyone really wants to start conversing or helping you? Or they don't know what's going on with you, but all they're doing is they're getting this gut feeling that something's not right. So then they're not in a place to be open and receive. But this is about just trusting that that desire within you is actually leading you somewhere. There is a purpose for you. If there wasn't a purpose, you wouldn't be feeling it within you. You wouldn't be having that desire. You wouldn't be having those constant thoughts about doing something. But it's about recognizing we just need to take one step at a time only. That is all.
Yeah, I love that. All right, Alice, as we wrap this up tonight, and thank you so much for doing this. It's like nearly 7:30 here at night. It's a little bit earlier for you because you're at one time zone away. But I just wanted to ask you one final question. What's your favorite song?
So my favorite song is the original, Living Next Door to Alice. And the reason being is when I was 13, I actually changed my name by default. And just to explain how powerful the mind is, I was born as Asya Ruslan, but for some reason I was given a translation of Assel, and I had a lower bottom lip. So I had this boy that used to chase me every day at school at lunchtime and go, Assel, Assel, Assel.
Oh.
So when I changed my name as soon as I can at the age of 13, which you could back in the day, it took me 30 years before I had the courage to ever repeat my name that I was raised with. So I couldn't even get out the English translation or the Arabic translation, out of my mouth to my own family, my own husband, my own daughter. That is the power of the mind when we have something in the past that doesn't make us feel good or has an associate of a memory that doesn't serve us.
Yeah.
So I couldn't get that name out for 30 years. And now I actually use that to inspire. So it's amazing the power of the mind. We limit ourselves with our own limitations and we don't even realize that we're doing it. The world needs you. Somebody out there needs you. You have a purpose to fulfill. Your inner voice has been patient with you all your life, waiting till you're ready. And it just wants you to have the courage to step forward and know and trust that life is going to look after you.
Oh, that's so encouraging and inspiring. Thank you so much. I'm really very grateful to you for coming on the Get Out of Teaching podcast tonight, Alice. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honour, and just thank you for the opportunity. You know, we're all connected, we're all united, and we're all here to support each other, but sometimes we just don't know where to get that support.
You've been listening to the Get Out of Teaching podcast, presented by Larksong Enterprises, with your host, Elizabeth Diakos. Do you know someone else who could benefit from hearing more stories of hope and transition from teachers all around the world? Please take a moment to share this and other episodes via your podcast app. Each share helps me reach listeners just like you who can benefit from this content. The Get Out of Teaching podcast is proud to be part of the Experts on Air podcast network. For show notes and other resources, please visit larksong.com.au/podcast.